Matt,
Rakush,
Jaren got isekai again.
Again. He's actually in the land of isekai right now.
He is, yeah. He got isekai to a whole different country.
I hope he doesn't get hit by a truck. Oh my god.
We made that joke a couple of weeks back. Now Jaren's just gone this week, so we'll do our best Jaren impression. Greetings, friends.
Greetings, friends. And welcome to another episode of The Mistake Zone.
How would you describe Jaren's voice if you had to, if someone's never heard Jaren's voice, this is the first episode of Saturday Morning Arcade, The Mistake Zone, that they're listening to. How would you describe regular host Jaren's voice to them?
I don't know. How do you describe someone's voice? I don't know what words to use to describe how a sound sounds.
There's words for it. There are words for it.
This isn't necessarily about Jaren's voice, but the first word that comes to me when I'm thinking of how people describe other people's voice is sonorous. Do you think Jaren has a sonorous voice?
What the bleep does sonorous mean? I don't know why I bleep myself out there. It's for all the kids listening, I guess.
I thought it was like a kind of like, when I think of a sonorous voice, I think of something that's very smooth and kind of, I don't know.
Like baritone?
Baritone implies, I think, deep. But I
think Jared's voice is kind of deep.
Jared's voice is deep, but I more so meant towards the word sonorous. I don't know if that implies deep. Does it? You know what? We have the power of the internet. I can just look up what sonorous means.
I mean, if you describe sonorous as smooth, I would say Jaren's voice is kind of smooth.
Yeah.
Actually,
yeah.
How? Yeah.
Imposingly deep and full. This doesn't mean deep.
So, if you had to describe Jaren's voice to ChatGPT or whatever AI it is you were thinking of using to create the podcast episodes, you would say sonorous?
I don't think I would. I don't know if I would use sonorous. Nothing against Jaren's voice. I don't know if sonorous is the right word. Maybe I'm thinking, putting the word sonorous too high on a pedestal here.
It's also very fancy of a word to use. Here at the Mistake Zone, we are simple people. We use simple words.
Yeah,
lots of ums. Every time I listen back to one of the episodes that I'm on, the thing that always catches my attention is how many times I say
I did that too. You know what's even worse for you, I think? Because I'm going through these raw. So I get all the likes and the ums and the mouth clicks and bad mouth noises that we all do. But you're getting the edited down version. So if that's already bothering you, man, you're not going to like how you talk.
Well, on that note, I'm going to be thinking about this for the rest of this recording. So thanks for that, Matt.
Rakush, I need to tell you right now, there is a post-it note on my monitor right in front of me that says, podcast, stop saying stop breathing between sentences.
Okay, so that breathing thing is a big problem for me right now as well. Because another they're fucked. And I swore, great. What a sequence of words that I just said there. No, but whenever I'm recording this podcast, I haven't been doing this on a regular basis. I just show up for, a couple of episodes and stuff, right? So I'm not fully practiced or warmed up as far as I need to talk like this or like that or whatever. Which means that I'm also not sure how much of my recording is catching my mouth breathing, which I somehow just do a lot more while recording the episodes.
You need to take in those big breaths to get all these dumb sentences out.
Yeah, exactly, right? The word salads that you guys hear, it requires a lot of lung capacity to actually do it, So these are the gifts that we give you. These are the sacrifices with our bodies that we make to give you this top quality podcasting on a weekly basis. Well, Matt on a weekly basis, me on a bi-monthly basis, or whenever Jaren gets isekai. So we have to, we're not trying to rescue Jaren this time. I think he's happily isekai this time around. So we're just going to let him do his thing. Whenever he wants to come back, he'll come back, I guess. It might be this week coming up. It might be the week after. Who knows? But good luck in your new ventures, Jaren. So yeah, we're just here this week. We don't really have a particular topic, a singular topic that we want to talk about, but we do kind of want to just jam a little bit about movies. So I know the show is called Saturday Morning Arcade.
Nope.
I don't know why I called it that. I know it's called The Mistake Zone. It is called the Mistake Zone now?
It is called
officially?
the Mistake Zone. It is called the Mistake Zone, brought to you by Saturday Morning Arcade. I think that is the full title that Jaren gave this podcast.
Got it. Okay, because the SMA logo is still on Spotify. So
I don't I don't know how to remove that.
we'll look that up at the end of this. But this is the Mistake Zone brought to you by Saturday Matinee Arcade.
Mm-hmm.
Not to be confused with Matt's name and not to be confused with the Japanese word matane. We are weebs here sometimes, but the title might have given it away. We want to talk a little bit about movies this week. We want to talk about a couple of things that have come out in the last couple of weeks that don't just speak to our hobbies, but are very tied into, just kind of like nerdy culture, geeky things, like, things that have kind of become pop culture recently. Like, Super Mario Bros. Movie came out. Neither of us have watched that. We won't be talking about it too much. But when we talk about these movies becoming pop culture, I think all you have to see is Mario Bros. Made 500 million globally in the box office. Like, that is a big success for any movie nowadays, So clearly it's in front and center of those conversations. So with that note, there's a couple of other movies we did want to talk about today. Matt, why don't we start off with the Dungeons and Dragons movie? I think
Yeah.
You watched it. So
Yes.
For this episode, Matt's watched one movie, I've watched the other movie. And I guess we're just kind of going to talk about it and ask questions. But why don't I just kind of open it up to you to just kind of explain what the movie is about and just kind of your thoughts on it.
The Dungeons and Dragon movie, I think, is a very fun watch. I don't think the Dungeons and Dragon movie does anything crazy in terms of storytelling, but I do think that this is a very good representation of a Dungeons and Dragons, or as good of a representation of Dungeons and Dragons translated to the big screen that there's going to be. The story itself is very basic. It's a redemption story where I wish I could remember this guy's name. Chris Pine?
Yeah, Chris
Yes,
Pine.
where
We're
Chris-
talking about the main character.
Where Chris Pine's character is basically kind of just on a kind of redemption arc. He did some bad stuff to his family at the start, and now he has to make it up to them through the course of the movie by basically finding MacGuffin magical item and using it to save the day. Like, that's basically what the story is here, and I don't think it's anything special, but I do think that the way they decided to adapt the story is very special and very, very D&D. Because I think this movie is a pretty funny movie in terms of how well it relates to actually like playing pen and paper RPGs. Like, Rakush, you have like a pretty good, or like a pretty decent, at least, experience like playing pen and paper RPGs, right?
Yeah, I would say so at this point in my life, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And like, same for me, like I love being on like the DMing side, I love being on the playing side, and just the kind of dumb hijinks that you get into during those games, I think is very well played in this movie. I think that there are clear signs where things are happening, and if you're looking at it from just a average moviegoer's point of view where they don't have too much of a knowledge of D&D, it is still funny. But if you're looking at it from a D&D point of view, imagining people playing D&D and this happening, you're like, okay, this guy's just literally getting bad rolls. You're rolling crits. And, oh, here's the dumb thing that the players are doing that the DM has to deal with now because they kind of went off course. There's a lot of good goose like that. And I really think that this like movie is like worth going into if you are a fan of D&D, because I don't think that there's really anything better. Like, maybe the Vox Machina stuff that's coming out on Amazon is probably like the closest that you're going to get in terms of like a serious production value standpoint. But I really do hope that this movie does get sequels, or at least like if not the right sequels, just like stuff within the same universe, because I really, really think it plays that way, or would play pretty well that way.
So I've got a lot of questions I want to ask you, just kind of based off the way you described it. As far as my consumption of the movie itself, even the trailers, it's been fairly minimal. So like all I really know is like Chris Pine's in it. The girl from Fast and the Furious is in it. I don't know too many of the other characters, so I don't really know how much of the D&D stuff is represented in the movie itself. So what I mean by that is like, and I guess what my first question for you is, how does it incorporate some of the things that are unique to pen and paper RPGs? And if you want to avoid spoilers, I think we could probably just talk around some of the plot points itself. If it's something you feel is worth people discovering themselves, maybe we can skip some of these things too. But
like, honestly, I don't know if anybody going into here is going to be too shocked at any spoilers, because like I said before, this is a very, in terms of story plot points, is a very average or very like by the book kind of story.
I see what you did there.
But yeah, like as far as the D&D stuff goes, if you are kind of like paying attention to it, there's basically like every like 5 or so minutes there's a kind of, hey, in the corner kind of nod to a D&D thing, or a quick glance at, hey, look, there's like rust monsters at the side, and if a normal person were to see it, they wouldn't really understand what those were, but hey, D&D nerds are gonna be like, oh, hey, rust monsters fighting over some metal, like that's a good goof.
Got it. Gotcha.
I don't know, it's just a fun kind of story. It does play on a lot of like tropes of, hey, here's the classic bard character getting into some bard hijinks and kind of, messing with plans. Barbarian's gonna get angry, barbarian's gonna rage. Here's a sorcerer, getting some crit fails and setting off some wild magic. It does have a lot of the kind of stuff you would expect to go wrong in a D&D campaign going wrong within this movie, and I really do appreciate that. I think the one D&D thing that I sort of wish was in this movie was kind of a zoom out to the players playing D&D type thing. But I fully understand like why they wouldn't do that.
So like what you're referring to is the idea of like showing like players controlling the player characters kind of thing.
Like, I don't know, just like some like quick thing of like, oh, they need to go have like Chris Pine do something, and the camera goes to pan to his character, but he's not there. So it like pans out and you just see like, I don't know, Michelle Rodriguez and everybody else in that movie kind of just sitting around the table, and then Chris Pine like coming back from like the washroom or getting snacks or something.
Sure, yeah, like
that might have been a good like post-credit scene or something, but yeah.
Gotcha. Like you were kind of hoping for a little bit more meta commentary, I guess, on like,
Yeah.
Got
it doesn't take away, but like, I don't know. I was hoping to see some kind of goof like that, but I fully understand why it isn't there.
Yeah, I mean, it is an interesting thing to have in there if they would have added it in, right? Because of such a, I mean, media like TV and film right now has gotten to a point where sword and sorcery is no longer considered like a niche market. I think it's like, I was saying earlier, the whole pop culture phenomenon really revolves around the things that even like 10, 15 years ago would have been considered too nerdy or too dorky to be like anything but a niche project, right? But at this point, there's so many sword and sorcery things out there, licensed ones as well. I mean, we got The Witcher on Netflix, which I consider sword and sorcery to some extent.
Yeah.
Game of Thrones kind of really just reinvented that genre. Lord of the Rings kind of came back with the TV show recently as well. So it sounds like this is kind of the right time for a D&D movie to come out. But also at the same time, I do wonder, as someone who's watched the movie, I'm wondering how you feel about the movie maybe being a little too generic with the story and not allowing the D&D elements to breathe. Like, do you feel like it was that way, or do you feel like they had enough D&D in it to warrant calling it D&D?
Oh, I think it definitely had enough D&D in it to warrant calling it a D&D movie. Because like while they never explicitly go into it in the movie, the whole thing is based within D&D lore. You are going to see like Arakoka, you are going to see Dragonborns, like you're going to see monsters that are from the monster manual. There's groups and stuff that are within the D&D books. The main MacGuffin item is a magical item that's in the D&D books, and it's basically telling like the exact same kind of story that you would if you were to use that magical item as a plot device. Like, it is very, very much a D&D movie, but it does not require you to have any D&D knowledge going in.
Thanks for answering that question, because as I was thinking back to how I asked it, I'm like, there's no way I asked that correctly, but you pretty much answered it.
Nailed
so
it. Got it in one.
Yeah. Appreciate it, bro. Appreciate that.
No, I got you.
This movie, like, I absolutely want to watch it. I just kind of got to find the right time to, not even the right time, I just got to find the time to go and watch the movie itself. It's a fascinating franchise to try to make a movie out of that. I wonder, it's like, is this the best medium for a D&D property to be released? So A couple of years back, Netflix released Bandersnatch, I believe that's what it was called, the Black Mirror
Yes,
kind
I
of
remember that. Mhm.
yeah, it was a choose your own adventure kind of series. And I thought it was a really cool series. I was kind of hoping to see a little bit more of that kind of television as well. As you're describing D&D, like the movie itself, I was wondering, like, how cool would it be if we got a Bandersnatch style TV show for D&D as well, right? Where it's like such a big part of D&D is the player having complete agency as far as
Mhm.
how they want to play the character, what they want the character to be, what
Mhm.
decisions the character makes and stuff like that. It's obviously limited when you're talking about any kind of interactive media outside of video games, but it would have been kind of cool to, at least to me, it sounds like it would be pretty cool if they had done like a Bandersnatch style D&D series as well.
See, my issue with that is that D&D in and of itself is a very kind of nerd culture property, right? And I think that also goes hand in hand with video games. And there are so many video games based on the D&D license or even like similar systems like Pathfinder and stuff where I think going to something like Bandersnatch is almost a step backwards in terms of like immersive storytelling with regards to D&D.
I'm assuming you're referring to the choose your own adventure elements of Bandersnatch, right? Like,
Yeah,
not
yeah,
the,
yeah, yeah.
Okay. I mean, I feel like anytime you try to make like, unless you make like an FMV video game out of D&D, right? Like even that, it's going to be limited options. But I think just considering the constraints of like how interactive movies and television can be, I just felt like it would have been a nice experimental kind of franchise to put out there. It's a big risk one, of course, right? Because how much money can you realistically put into creating something like that that stays relevant, I guess, beyond just kind of like the gimmick. So of course, like, you know, it's one of those ideas that's like nice to think about, but then like you get into potential execution of it and you're like, dog, this is a terrible fucking idea at that point, you know? But it's just it's part of a larger thought of just like these interactive properties that get licensed into non-interactive media, and you know how you can still kind of provide like a personalized experience to the viewer as well, or the audience, right? Like it's just like one of those, like there's no real answer to it. It's just a vague thought to have, but it's definitely the franchise to me that allows for that as well. So yeah.
Like I almost feel that if we're going for something that's Bandersnatch like I said earlier, like I think D&D might be a bit too expansive. I almost feel like you have to have a bit more of a limited kind of scope in terms of like choices. Like I think maybe a good like property, like if they're gonna do something like Bandersnatch again, would be something like Alice in Wonderland or Squid Game, where it kind of has that understanding, like, oh, making your choice type thing already built within it.
Right.
But yeah, I don't really know like what other properties would work within that kind of Bandersnatch framework.
I mean, I've always been a supporter of creating original content for new technology as well, so it doesn't necessarily have to be licensed content that goes into a choose your own adventure like type of thing that Bandersnatch was, right? So overall, it does sound like it was a pleasant experience. Like I don't necessarily, nothing you're saying, nothing I've read about it, nothing anyone has tried to sell me on the movie makes it sound like it's anything but just a pleasant 2 hours of your evening kind of thing. So that and there's nothing wrong with that. I do feel like there needs to be more movies like that now as well, right?
Yeah.
It almost feels like post-pandemic, I feel like if you just put out movies like this, I would even add like a Bullet Train that came out last summer, the Brad Pitt movie. Like those are just like comfy action movies to just kind of watch and enjoy and, you know, kill some time, right? I do feel like movies need, like the theater experience needs to go back to that a lot more. And I'm kind of glad that they're going for some of these franchises that are like so beloved, not from my childhood necessarily, but just from like, you know, the young adult years, which I'm old enough to now be nostalgic about young adulthood, you know? So it's nice to see that. It's pleasant to see that as well. And I think there was a pretty funny moment that I had a couple of weeks back when I was back home with the family. my mom saw a trailer for D&D and she was like, "Oh, this movie looks interesting." And then like I have a tattoo on my right arm that's inspired by a D&D campaign that I used to play with a couple of other friends years back. And so like there was just like this cool moment where I could kind of like talk to her about that, and I'm like, "Oh yeah, like the tattoo is based on this franchise and stuff," you know, and like her eyes just kind of like lit up in a way that was like not like, you know, amazed or like, you know, she was happy or anything, but she was just like one of those like she had just learned some real like mind breaking information or something for her. So it was, yeah, like, you know, it's just like these cool little interactions that I'm having in real life now, you know, because this movie exists. So
Yeah, why don't you go watch D&D with your mom?
because I'm 33 years old and I still am embarrassed about that stuff. Sorry, Mom.
Just go to a drive-in. It's playing at your favorite drive-in, I think.
Well,
right now.
the only drive-in that's in Oakville, but yeah. Well, if I'm back in time and it's still showing it, I might actually go watch that because I wasn't able to hit up the drive-in last time I was there because the weather was kind of crummy. But
Yeah, weather's good now.
yeah, the weather is great right now. Side note, if you hear any background noises such as dogs barking and stuff, it's because we're close to summertime, folks, and I live close enough to a park that there's a lot of people on like, you know, hikes and trails and stuff here as well. So
It's wild to me that you just said we're close to summertime when winter just like finished.
yeah, but we're also like sitting here in like 25-degree weather, you know, and it's like, yeah, this, I don't know, spring barely exists anymore, you know, like spring is like all of like a week and a half, and then suddenly it's like short season and sandal season, you know, it's like, but also I'm brown, so the first moment that my toes won't freeze over, I bring out the sandals. So, you know, I live by heats out, feets out as my motto. So yeah, I don't know how we went from D&D to heats out, feets out, but we've done it.
Yeah, that's how we do. That's how we do.
We chose our own adventure there.
But like overall, yeah, D&D is a great movie that if you're looking for just a nice kind of light watch, D&D is definitely worth it. Honestly, I really do hope that they do make more movies within this franchise, and I also hope that those are all going to be mostly standalone movies. Because
I wanted to ask you about that actually. I'm because I know we've been talking amongst our friend group about doing Pathfinder campaigns, and the way you wanted to build it out was almost like this like expanded cinematic universe style thing where like people can like drop in and drop out at like different parts of the game and like in different storylines in the game in the same universe and stuff. Like how, if it were up to you, would you build kind of like an extended cinematic universe for D&D based on this movie that you just watched?
I mean, I think the way that would have to work is kind of just, if you're not just going to totally rip off the Marvel Cinematic Universe, is that D&D already has a very intricate lore to it, and they already brought in a lot of groups. I guess like in particular, they brought in the Harpers and the Red Wizards, which are like easily in D&D lore to begin with. And if you kind of just use Red Wizards as the common bad guy, I feel like that makes sense. If you want to just use the Harpers as the common good guy, that makes sense. I think one goof that I really, really want to see in a future D&D movie, if they make a future D&D movie, I mean, they bring back one of the actors as a completely different character and just never talk about it.
Right.
Like, I really want, hey, like, oh, look, Michelle Rodriguez is back, but she's not the character she played in the first movie. Like, I feel like, hey, this is just a new campaign. Would be a really, really fun goof, but I feel like that would also be very confusing for audiences who wouldn't understand that goof. But
it would be a little too inside baseball, I guess, for the regular movie-going audiences.
Yeah, because that messes with like continuity at some point.
But those are also the kind of swings that I want to see these franchises take, right? Like,
oh yeah.
Why would you want to then, like, if you're not gonna do some of these things, like if this movie ends up being successful, which it sounds like it's been moderately successful at the very least, like these are the kind of swings I'd love to see them take with future movies as well, right? But I feel like the idea of just like, yeah, like tying in different stories, which are like very TV show-esque, where it's like you take all these different storylines and in like this big movie, bring them all together and tie it all in like this grand like finale kind of way as well. Like we haven't seen it since Endgame. Like even that felt like it was a once in a lifetime thing, but still it'd be nice to see it with D&D as well.
I mean, I feel like it also requires a level of planning that I don't have. Like full disclosure, for this campaign that I want to run, it really is going to be a sense of me throwing out plot hooks, knowing where I want those plot hooks to go, but it's going to be up to the players to decide which plot hooks sound interesting and which are going to kind of just fizzle out and die. So I'm also going to be kind of playing it by ear, yeah.
I am pretty excited for this campaign too, because there is a part of me that has always been a sucker for the big crossover events and comic books and stuff, right? Like the first comic book I ever read was Christ on Infinite Earths, which was this big DC crossover in 1985, I believe. I didn't read it in 85. I'm not that old. But when I read it in the mid 2000s, it was one of the first big things that I'd ever read. And I just kind of love this idea of these different characters from different parts of the universe, different corners of the universe, different genres even, all kind of being brought into this one universe-spanning, universe-threatening story, you know? And, like, I'm really excited for what you're going to be building, honestly. Like,
you're putting a lot of pressure on me right now.
I was just thinking that as I said that, but no, man, if anyone can handle the pressure, I know it's you. You got this.
No, I quite easily crumble under pressure.
Sometimes you just got to say it to a friend, even if, you know, they don't believe it, you know? So,
yeah.
Yo, bro, if you don't believe in yourself, it's okay, because I believe in you.
Okay, that doesn't help me at all.
How can I make this worse? Let's see. No pressure at all. No pressure whatsoever. Yeah.
Honestly, Rakush, the biggest worry I have about this game is that I'm going to be using a piece of software called Foundry Virtual Tabletop.
Okay.
And in order to use this piece of software, I have to host it on my computer, and then people are going to be connecting to me. And Rakush, you know how my internet is very, very sketchy.
Oh, it's been shoddy lately. Yeah. It's,
and I'm just very concerned at how that experience is going to be with me. Maybe just my internet just fully dying every hour or two during the campaign.
I mean, I don't know if those campaigns should be lasting past 2 hours, but time also kind of flies when you're playing D&D, so who knows? I don't really know how to transition away from D&D into anything else, but
Rakush, come on, that one was so easy. You could have nailed it so good. Rakush, it's speaking about wasting time. You know what game I've wasted a lot of time on in my life, Rakush?
What game have you wasted a lot of time in your life on, Matt?
It's Tetris.
Ooh, that is a good transition. I had two options there, okay? I was actually wondering, because in the show order, we also wanted to talk a little bit about another franchise. I don't know if I want to call it a beloved franchise, but another franchise that, like, you know, both of us, Matt and I, have been pretty interested in. So I was like, is there a way to tie it into that? I don't know. But you brought Tetris up. Let's talk Tetris. The movie's name is Tetris.
Is it not Tetris the movie? I thought it was Tetris the movie.
I mean, it's got Tetris in it, so I just call it Tetris. Like, if you call it Tetris the movie, that's fine as well. But at that point, it's like, I'm not saying Sonic the movie, you know, or like Super Mario Bros. The movie. I'm just saying Super Mario Bros.
You're right. It is just called Tetris. Okay. I thought the movie was a subtitle on there.
Right. So this movie, Matt, is kind of interesting because it's not really like Tetris the movie, as in like, oh, you're like, you know, Tetris blocks come to life or whatever. It's I think that was Pixels, but this one is more kind of like a retelling of how Tetris was brought stateside. For those who don't know, Tetris was actually created in Russia back when the Cold War was still going on by Alexei Pajitnov. I'm getting the last name wrong for sure. So, you know, don't hold your breath on that. But
you put enough of a Russian accent on it when you said it that, you know, it's passable probably.
Yeah. Anything beyond that, I'm probably just opening myself up to some cancelable scenarios. So let's not do that. So it's a story about how, you know, this guy from the States wants to bring it stateside because he plays it at this convention, and it's this retelling of just how convoluted it was to get the rights for that game worldwide as well. And it's not a long movie. It's on Apple Plus. I think it's anywhere between 90 minutes to 2 hours long as well. So, like, you're not really, again, like, wasting too much of a morning, afternoon, evening watching this movie either. Like, you know, just get some popcorn, sit down, watch it. And the way they tell the story, it's very breakneck pace at the very beginning as well, because they're kind of going from, like, the States to Tokyo to Russia, and there's just like a lot of those kind of things happening. But I thought it was a pretty interesting kind of way of telling the story, and, like, you know, it's not of course they've taken some liberties with how they like, you know, how the things actually went down and stuff like that. You got to build drama in these things, right? But it is pretty fascinating that like this guy from the States ended up going to Russia, you know, not on a legal visa, and then basically having to figure out how to get the rights for this movie as well. And they had to build a lot of tension without necessarily having a lot of action in this movie, although they do kind of build in some action sequences near the end itself, which without getting too spoilery, I kind of really liked the execution of some of the quote unquote action element in that movie.
Yeah, I thought it was like done pretty well.
Oh, so you have watched this
movie?
Yeah. Okay, sorry, I was under the impression you hadn't. My bad. So you know which scene I'm talking about as well, and I think like what I really it's of course it's not a perfect movie. I think there's some flaws with how they talk about like how the main character talks about, you know, Tetris, and how they kind of like simplify a lot of the plot points into just exposition in like, you know, the first 15 minutes of the movie itself. But I did really enjoy the historical snapshot of a video game that like so many people have played, right? And it's just become such a common household staple. Like you can ask anybody what Tetris is and they'll be able to tell you, right? Like kids might not be able to tell you what a floppy disk is anymore, but they will still know Tetris. Like it is timeless, it is universal in a way that video games just would like aspire to be, would like dream for, would kill for, right? Like it is that franchise. And just knowing that like the story and what the story behind it was, you know, even though again the movie takes some liberties, it was just cool. It was cool to see it. I don't know how else to describe the plot itself without getting into some of like the finer details, which the finer details kind of make up most of the movie. So if I give you the details, like I would say there's really no point in watching the movie at that point. But if this is kind of like your entryway into video game history, I felt like it was an interesting entry point to like, you know, looking up further information about that story and further information just about how licensing worked in video games and how publishing works and stuff like that as well. But I'm kind of wondering what your thoughts are now, because now that I know you watched this movie, I'm kind of curious, like, do you feel like if I were to frame this movie as like, this is your entry point into video game history, like, is that a fair description?
I don't know, because I feel like while this is a story about video game history, I don't know if it's really fair to call it like a good entryway to video game history, because I felt that this is very much a story about like I think you could have changed Tetris out of this to basically any other property and still kept the same plot without really losing anything. Like, this is more so a movie about how production rights work, I think.
Yeah, publishing and like the production rights and you know, just the like, I found it really fascinating when they were describing in the beginning how like the whole licensing element worked, where like this one character kind of goes to these countries, licenses games for like dirt cheap, and then makes like a solid profit on just like, you know, putting them out, right? So that was really fascinating. Just kind of like the idea of this industry that is so, I mean, it's an industry that is still growing, video game development, of course. And it's never going to stop growing, right? Because of just, even if it's not growing, it's evolving. But this story happens at a time where it is a genuine Wild West in video game development. You know, like no one really knows what it is they're getting into. It's kind of like you can even see that in how some of the characters really react to the idea of like, you know, getting rights to a video game. Like one of the main characters is the son of the guy who runs the Daily Mail in the UK, which is like this newspaper company. And it's like, you know, you don't even think about that as like, oh, hey, what the hell? Like these guys played a part in this story, you know? And it just, yeah, like, you know, even kind of opens it up to conversations about like Nintendo being like not trading cards, but like it was some kind of like card game manufacturer before
the Hanafuda cards.
Hanafuda cards, yeah, thank you. So like it's even just kind of opens it up to looking up more of that, you know? So it's like when I say entryway into video game history, it's more about like looking up different elements and looking up how like how kind of like crazy the entire industry was back in the day as well.
To be honest, actually, I actually think this might even be a better entryway into the Soviet Union. Because I'll be honest, like I'm not really somebody who follows or reads up on too much history and stuff like that. So my knowledge of the Soviet Union is very limited because, like, really, the Soviet Union had basically fallen around the time we were born, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it really is just a thing of like history. And I don't know, like seeing how rigid everything was, because you always hear, oh yeah, you don't want to deal with like communism because look at how Russia was when it was the Soviet Union. And outside of like people just pointing stuff out like that, saying, hey, communism bad, I really never did personally study up or look into what it was actually like there. So just seeing, hey, like this is how like the KGB is moving around. This is, I guess, actually like how much they're limiting stuff leaving the Soviet Union. Like I do think that was, from that viewpoint, it was also very interesting.
That's fascinating to me because, I mean, it's fascinating from a larger standpoint, not just in the conversation itself, right? Because I guess like the way I started like really getting into world history and stuff, not just through school, but like I watch a lot of action movies, right? And like one of the big tropes in action movies is always like this mysterious Eastern European or like, you know, Russian villain and stuff. I would say Rocky 4 is actually like, jokes aside, Rocky 4 probably got a lot of people to figure out what USSR was because of just how that entire storyline was built out. It was like, you know, US versus Russia in a boxing match and stuff like that. So when you say it, like initially for me, I'm like, yeah, that's like, oh wow, like that's kind of wild. But then you think about it, you step back and it's like, it's actually not that far-fetched to, you know, be picking up some like world history facts and stuff from some of these kinds of movies as well, right? Like, it's unexpected places, but it at least gets your brain working in a way that you're like, hey, I want to look up more of this. Like, this is kind of interesting. Another example that comes to mind, not maybe the best example, but one that I do think is another interesting one, is something like Jack the Ripper is like this mythical urban legend figure, right? And it's like from the Victorian era, like the industrialization of the UK and like, you know, just the griminess of like the 1800s and stuff, and you look it up and you're like, oh, like that, you want to look up more of that. You then figure out more of that history, even if that story doesn't really have more than just like an urban legend element to it, you know? So it's, yeah,
man, Jack the Ripper is actually also kind of a weird one for me, because I never realized how much loose like bits of like trivia or knowledge I had that were all actually related to Jack the Ripper, and I didn't realize it until I played a board game about Jack the Ripper. I'm like, oh, hey, this thing's here. Oh, this thing's here. Oh, all of this stuff is in my, I guess, like media memory just because of Jack the Ripper, and I just didn't know it.
This is how we find out that you're actually a hidden descendant of Jack the Ripper.
Yep, that's me. That's me.
Yeah, Matt the Ripper.
Matt the Ripper.
Except this time he's ripping farts.
Yeah. Yo, Rakush, this place smells like farts.
Yeah.
And I'm really hoping you don't have to come here to record one day.
Did you just like replace all the furniture at your house?
Yeah, okay, I replaced a bunch of crap, but there's been a lot of time since that's happened. About a week of time since I replaced all this furniture, and I've been ripping mad farts in here.
Got it. It's quite flatulent in there, is what you're saying. Excellent. I'm looking forward to being there the next time, and then being on a future episode trying to describe the smell. We tried to describe voices at the start of this episode. Maybe we describe smells at the start of the next episode.
I feel like smells is an easier thing to describe, because I feel like you describe that more often. Don't you think?
Now, that's an interesting question. We'll come back to Tetris in a second, but I am now curious. What is the easiest human thing to describe? Smell?
I think smell
sound
is one of them.
I would say smell, sound, or touch would be the three that are like, which one of those three is easiest to describe? Because I would say how a person looks is the easiest to describe.
Yeah.
And then it's these three.
Do you include taste inside of touch?
How a person tastes? Is that what you're getting at?
We're talking about people specifically. I thought we were just talking about the senses in general. Sorry.
No, I feel like I would say like, let's say how to describe a person. Like, what is the easiest thing to describe of a person?
Oh yeah, okay. So, like, of course, sight is the easiest. I feel like you don't describe how somebody smells unless they smell bad or they wear a particular brand of perfume or cologne, right?
But I would say it's easy. Yeah, but it's easy to
Uh huh.
describe the smell, right? At that point, because it's like you smell musty or
Uh
like
huh.
you smell good. You smell like food. You
Uh
smell
huh.
like burgers. You
I
smell
mean,
like
to be fair, I
farts.
also say the phrase "you sound
Um,
like an idiot" a lot. So I don't know.
well, yeah, but like idiot is a vaguer description, whereas like everything with smells are like very specific. You know, it's like
Okay.
I feel like been enough smells in history to be able to say like when you smell good, you're not smelling like farts unless that's your kink. We don't kink shame
You know what?
here
I
at
don't
the
think I've
Mistake Zone.
ever had to describe how a person feels physically.
What are you talking
Like,
about?
oh, actually, maybe if I'm like, like touching like, hey, their hair after they get a haircut.
What?
But like, I mean, I don't know how.
How a person feels
Yeah, I
physically?
mean, like, because
What?
you can describe how somebody feels emotionally, right? But like, I don't think.
How a person feels? Bloated, fit, like gassed.
Oh shit. Okay, I think I now I overcorrected in the wrong direction, and I meant how does it feel? How does like this person's like skin feel? Like, does it feel sticky, or does it feel like what?
Oh, you're
I've gone way too
you're
far. The
definitely
other,
Jack the
I've gone
Ripper's.
way too
Yeah,
far.
no, you that no, this is definitely Jack the Ripper territory. So let's come back to more
Uh huh.
pleasant
The
conversations.
KGB.
The Soviet
Yeah.
Union, yeah, the KGB, yes. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's much else to really say about Tetris the movie either. I think it's just a fascinating watch. It's something related to a hobby that we all love. If you listen to this podcast, there's a non-zero chance that you like video games to some
Hmm.
extent. Unless we are the number one podcast for hating video games, in which case, my bad for recommending this. But no, I think it's a pleasant watch. I don't think it's going to change your world or change your mind or anything, but I think it's cool. I think it's definitely worth watching. And I think, I guess to like summarize my thoughts beyond that, just in a couple more sentences, I think movies in general or like historical movies or like period pieces, TV shows even, are a really good way of introducing people to eras or like parts of history that are just like really fascinating and deserve a little bit more attention and stuff
Hmm.
like that. I think beyond just video games, like there was a show, I want to say 10 years ago now, it was a while back on ESPN called The Bronx is Burning. It was actually a drama series about the New York Yankees in the 60s during a summer where a serial killer named the Son of Sam was actually running rampant, and they kind of didn't really have much crossover as far as like the actual plot lines
Uh
are
huh.
concerned, but they built this show up in a way that was like, hey, here's New York City in this, 1 year in the 60s. I can't remember the exact year, but like it's this 1 year in the 60s, tensions are running high in the city, but at the same time, like the New York Yankees are like absolutely crushing it on the field. And so it's like, just kind of tying in like the public tensions going on at the same time as like, just this like one escape from reality that like the people in the city had at a time when baseball was still very much a big deal as well. So I love when movies do stuff like that or TV shows do stuff
Hmm.
like that where they share a snapshot of a world in that time with you while like telling a story that might not necessarily have much, like the story itself or like the plot itself might not have much that's relevant to your hobbies. Like if for example you don't play video games and you watch the Tetris movie, I still think you can enjoy
Hmm.
that movie because it's not just about, hey, it's Tetris. It is also about just like, hey, here's how like US Russia
Yeah.
tensions were back in the day kind of thing. So
Honestly, arguably, I think if it was a movie about Tetris, it'd probably be a worse movie.
oh, way worse, yeah.
Hmm.
I think like it is not a good video game franchise to turn into like a very like popcorn flick kind
Yeah.
of movie, which is where like I think they treated this with the right tone and like just it was lighthearted enough, it was nerdy enough as far as like it is a nerdy property, but I think they captured like the seriousness and everything pretty well.
Hmm.
And they built a surprising amount of tension out of a story that like might not have really had that much tension as far as like, hey, was this guy really like in KGB offices every day? Was there like this big chase sequence and stuff. Like, who knows, right? Like, I'm sure if you look it up more, like, yeah, maybe there's some stories that confirm that stuff for you. But they've found a surprising amount of tension in it that I was like, yeah, this is kind of cool.
Honestly, also just made me want to play Tetris.
Yeah. I guess, like, speaking of things that make you want to play a game, right? Like, we are done talking about the movies that we wanted to talk about, but there is another thing that, Matt, I don't know if you watched any of the cutscenes this week, but I just got into, like, this rabbit hole of watching League of Legends cutscenes on YouTube.
No, I can tell you that. Actually, no. You know what? I did watch some this week, and it was the ones that you linked me.
Sure.
But okay, I want to know, Rakush, like, what brought you down this rabbit hole? Because I just remember earlier this week you asked me if I wanted to play League of Legends with you.
I mean, I've been asking for a couple of weeks, to be fair.
Oh, okay.
But no. So I think this is a bit of a plot twist for anyone that listened to our episodes, like, 10 years ago. I'm actually watching some of the League of Legends esports stuff now. It's a massive development in my life, because there was a point in my life where I'm like, dog, I do not consider this sport. Like, take sport out of the name kind of thing. Did a whole segment on it back when we were still...
I totally forgot about that segment.
We were still at CFRE Radio back then. It was that one rare instance where I was still trying to be Mr. Journalist, so I wrote everything down and was like, here's a radio piece. And it was like, yeah, okay. When I look back on it, it's quite embarrassing. But all those thoughts being what they are, I think as I've gotten older, I've kind of just started watching a lot more video game playthroughs instead of finding myself playing a lot of these games. And I think part of that has to do with the idea that I know what games I can play and I know what games I absolutely suck at. League of Legends, after like season 4 or 5, which was like 2014, I sucked at, and like I just didn't really have a full set of 5 people to play with, because that's the point where I was at in that game, and solo queuing just didn't feel fun. So I kind of drifted away from it for a long time. But then I think, like, Matt, you and I both watched Arcane. I want to say it was last year.
Yeah, whenever it came out. Yeah,
and I think the general consensus is like this might be one of the best video game related TV shows, movies of all time. And I don't actually think that's an exaggeration. I think the way they handled it, the way the source material was brought to life over the span of 8 to 10 episodes, it was spectacular, man. And like the quality of the animation and stuff was really, really good too, in a way that's like almost reminiscent of how Blizzard handles their cutscenes whenever they do like big releases for WoW, or when Diablo was Diablo 3 and 4, like the cutscenes were fantastic. StarCraft even. And Riot Games has kind of taken that on a little bit themselves as well, where they've built out this game that has like 100 characters already.
I feel like when you started playing, it was already in the hundreds.
I think when I started playing, it was in the 90s. So I just looked it up, and it's now at 163 champions in League of Legends.
That's actually lower than I was expecting it to be.
I mean,
I understand you can't. I understand you can't have like such a big roster, but with how big League is, I for some reason was expecting low 200s, like high like 190 or something.
Sure, but even like releasing 63 characters over the span of 8-9 years.
Oh yeah, that's still like crazy.
It's a lot, yeah. Like it's no joke. Like if you compare it to DLC characters for like fighting games, that's a pretty consistent output all along. Like I mean, at the same time, considering like major changes to gameplay elements in that game and stuff as well. But I think like I just started watching the games. I believe it was LCS and LES, which I think are 2 separate tournaments that end up then becoming the World Championship. I've just been watching them because it's on Twitch, but I find myself watching those a lot more, and I just got reminiscent and nostalgic for League of Legends, and then to this date, I will not forget. It was me, Jaren, and another friend of mine. We were playing League of Legends, and Jaren barely played League with us, and that was like the only time that I ever got a pentakill in League. And it's like, I have the screenshot. I sent it to you as well, Matt. You saw it. Like, that was 9 years ago, and I still remember that. You know, almost as if like it is one of the proudest achievements of my life. And
I mean, I feel like you always remember your first penta.
The only penta. Like, it's not an easy thing to get. Like, I don't think people are getting pentas left, right, and center either, you know? So it's not even just like the first. It was like, I knew in that moment, I'm like, dog, I feel like I beat League of Legends. Yeah. But yeah, I just got like very nostalgic for it, you know? And that's why I was like messaging. I'm like, yo, bro, you think we should play this again? And like jokingly, because yeah, absolutely not.
No. I feel like anybody who plays League knows that you shouldn't play League of Legends. I feel like
you're right.
Yeah,
you're right. It was just one of those things where I'm like, I wanted to relive my young adulthood, as I was saying earlier. You know, like getting nostalgic for young adulthood now instead of like childhood.
I really wish that there were kind of more public stats on League gameplay, because I want to see, like, based on just like stats, how many people who used to play League logged in around the time Arcane came out. And then I also want to see, of those accounts that logged in, how many games they played.
Right, like the retention rate, as you would call it in advertising. Yeah, like I mean, I know you looked up the numbers a couple of days ago on Arcane, and I know the numbers said like most active players, like the numbers spiked like quite dramatically once Arcane came out, right? Like so clearly that series had a big impact on just like, you know, rejuvenating the fan base and getting a lot of people back into this franchise as well. And a part of getting nostalgic for League of Legends was also kind of getting nostalgic for the lore and for the characters that I used to play as and stuff. And so, you know, I started kind of like going back and watching some of like the old cutscenes or the cinematics as they're called. And I think like what really like caught me off guard is, you know, in that process, and then in talking to you and some of our other mutual friends as well, is how many cutscenes Riot Games has actually made for League of Legends. And like, I would say maybe like 2 years before Arcane became a thing, they got really active in their video production side of things. Like, you could call it video marketing, whatever you want to call it, but like there's a whole playlist on YouTube with like fucking 300 videos that are like, you know, sure, half of them are just like trailers and like just like, you know, visual graphics that aren't like full motion animation or whatever it is, but like that's still a lot of content to churn out that's also tied into the game's lore. And one of the things I also found really fascinating going through those cutscenes as well is just not just the graphical progression over the years. Like, it very clearly, like, once 2013, 2014 hit, like, I would say that was around season 4 or 5 of the championship. The production quality just, like, skyrocketed, and it was, like, no turning back from there. The thing that I found really fascinating, though, is how much more character is now present in like these 90-second videos and like these 2-minute 3-minute long videos. You know, it's like they've got to fit like a lot of lore and a lot of like, you know, characters and stuff in there as well. Like, we're talking 163 characters, not all of them being these videos, but like being accurate to all those characters is a Herculean task, you know. And I found it like super, super fascinating that like over the years, like that level of storytelling has gotten so intricate and so well done as well, you know, that like you don't have to sit for 10 episodes of Arcane to get that good characterization. You can even get that in the cutscenes, you know. And
yeah, like I really do like that. If you are a League player now, you basically do have a mini story piece that releases alongside your like gameplay. The fact that basically every single champion that comes out now has a, like you said, like a 3 to 5 minute kind of backstory video for them.
Yeah.
Makes me really, I don't know if jealous is the right word, or like envious or whatever, whichever is the correct one you're supposed to use in like that sort of case. But it makes me really that verb towards them, because I know that when I was playing League, I would have loved to see this kind of animation or like trailer really like beautifully animated and like written about this new champion coming out, or my favorite champion like coming out, or biasing me towards a new champion and making me want to, you know, put in real ass money towards buying champions.
Exactly. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, like I don't know, like
What were
I
those
really,
characters for you?
I don't know, to be honest. When I started League, a lot of my choice towards which character I wanted to play was towards which character is cool, or which character I thought was like cool looking. And back then, I realized like now that that was a very bad way to do it, because I usually pick characters that weren't really within my actual play style, because I would end up playing a lot of AD carries and AP carries, and that's just not actually a role I enjoy playing.
It's a lot of pressure,
playing
bro.
in that
It's
game.
a lot of pressure.
Yeah, like I do really prefer playing like a top lane bruiser
Yeah.
or a support, and usually their designs didn't really appeal to me. But you know, once I started, I guess later on in my League career, picking characters more for their kits instead of for their looks, I became, I guess, a little bit like happier there. But I don't know, at that time it really was early in League, and you weren't really getting that kind of animation. So like, you know, I'll never get a good, I don't know, Gangplank video. I don't think I'm
Yeah.
ever gonna get a good Soraka video, or I think Maokai might have been new enough that he had like some animation stuff,
Right.
but it wasn't at the level that it is now.
I mean, Gangplank got an interesting lore thing happening with him, right? Like, it's not necessarily a full
Yeah,
video.
but that's not the same.
Yeah.
Also, when they changed his kit for the new lore, I didn't like it, so I stopped playing it.
Yeah, no, I feel that. Like,
They also did it for Sivir, and I stopped playing Sivir because I didn't like the new way that Sivir played.
Sivir was the one with the crossblade, right?
Yeah, the kind of like, yeah, the cross boomerang.
Okay,
Yeah.
so one of the videos I watched did have Sivir in it as well. So
Yeah, it was Azir's
Yes.
video, I believe.
yeah, that's right.
It was good lore. I like that one.
See, that's the thing that I find super fascinating about League of Legends is like they've built up. It almost kind of just happened naturally for them, where this game was initially built as an inspired by Dota, right? Like it's this 3-lane game, like, you know, you're playing it with that stuff. Even when you watch like the reveal video, it's like characters that are completely different from each other, all just kind of like, you know, with different play styles and stuff like that. Like, it was really fascinating, and then suddenly it gets popular, and then suddenly it's like, hey, we need lore, we need flavor text, and they're building this world out. Like, there's rough understandings that like, oh yeah, like, you know, there's Noxus, there's Demacia, there's whatever that pirate island is called, I forget. Then like, you know, it's just like there's this rough idea that yeah, like this world exists, and then suddenly like years pass and like this game again like skyrockets in popularity. And I would say around the time where Vi and Jinx got released as characters is when the game's lore and like the narrative elements really started like picking up a lot of popularity and steam as well, you know. And
Yeah.
it was so like fascinating how it all kind of got built up. But then as it was getting built up, I think what really like was working for me personally is going back to like talking about player agency with storytelling in D&D. This kind of existed with League of Legends as well, where it's like, you know, these characters exist, you know where they come from, but you don't know everything. You know just enough to then start building out these stories in your head as well. So you're like, you know, these guys are the good guys, or like these guys are doing it because of this or that, or like, you know, it like you just start building headcanons out, right? And like,
it very much is a, hey, this toy was in my toy box, I'm
Yeah.
gonna make a story out of it.
exactly, that's a great description. And like, I think that really was a cool element of the game's lore. And then and like, you know, I still think like that kind of exists with that game, but the story that they're telling now has the added benefit that like they're telling these stories that previously only existed in the player's head, even though it might not be the exact story that the players want told about their characters. It's just kind of a cool way of like seeing these things come to life instead of just like in your mind or like, you know, through the games that you play. You actually get a TV show like Arcane out of it, or you get like this 3-minute long cutscene where you don't need to spend all this time building out like all this backstory and lore. You know just enough that like you know why two sides are fighting, and then if you don't know why two sides are fighting, you're shown just enough in the videos to look it up even more as well. And it's just like, to me, that is such a masterful production of like these cutscenes as well. I know the 2023 one is getting shat on pretty badly because it's like it's kind of justified. They went a very different route with the hype video this year, where there's no real characters that are shown or anything like that. It's just like a trip through like the actual Summoner's Rift itself. There's really no like storytelling happening. There's no plot in it. And it was definitely a downgrade after, what was it, like 3 years of them building up. They were building up like the Shadow Isles, Thresh, I believe the Curse Kings, Viego was his name. Like they were building these characters up as kind of like these like, you know, world threatening like Ice Walker-esque villains, you know? So after all of that, then suddenly getting a video like we did in 2023, I can see why people were kind of not happy with it. But ignoring that, dude, like this is what... Game came out in 2009, 2010, so it's now like 13 years of like lore building, old lore and new lore, because there was a bunch of retconning that happened as well. But that's a lot of cool stuff to work with, and a lot of cool things for them to like, a lot of cool toys for them to use, like you said. You know, it's like, yeah, that. And so like I think that was kind of like why I wanted to go back and like really just kind of watch these videos, is all this just kind of like rush of nostalgia and wonder, and like, you know, just reminiscing over how the imagination kind of ran crazy with some of these characters as well. You know, it was like, it's really cool to see. Not all my characters were in it. I played Dr. Mundo, who is only in like this one death metal music video. Master Yi, who seems to have been completely forgotten in this game. He's just gone at this point. I don't see him. Lux shows up in a bunch of videos, so like that was kind of cool. Lux was one of the better characters to play because you could play Lux as mid or support. I don't know if that meta's changed lately. And then Misfortune, and Misfortune also has had a ton of lore and story related stuff like in the last couple of years as well. So like Misfortune fans are like feasting quite a bit. So yeah, it's definitely a ramble on League of Legends that like has gone a little too long on my end for sure. But no, there was definitely just like a sense of wonder and excitement for a game that I know I'm not going to be able to play anymore. And it's like, that is fascinating, right? Like, I mean, that is...
I even stopped playing in like 2014 at the latest, I think. And I still, to this day, still basically follow League of Legends lore because it's just such a fun thing to look at and like watch, right? And I don't see myself falling off of that anytime soon.
Yeah, and I'm super excited for whatever Arcane Season 2 ends up being. In the back of my mind, I'm kind of hopeful that they'll focus on some of the other plot points as well, because I really want to see Noxus. I really want to see Shattered Isles. I want to see the pirate kind of section as well, because there's so many cool characters in those things.
I feel like Noxus probably shows up. I don't know about like Shattered Isles and pirates.
I doubt Shattered Isles. Yeah, because like the way the story is being told in Arcane, like I just don't see Supernatural coming in a way that for a larger audience makes sense. But then I'm also just kind of hoping Arcane is successful enough that they're like, hey, let's do this for other characters.
I actually wonder if they're going to do that. Because of how big Arcane became, I'm curious on if they're going to do, I don't know if spin-off series is the correct word, but like alternate series in different parts of the world.
Yeah. I mean, they would need the funding for that. They would need more time for the studio to work on that. I do think the risk you run of like doing multiple things at once or different projects at once is you get to a point where you don't have the same people that worked on Arcane working on it anymore. And you're kind of watering down multiple products. So I want to see that, but I also know that the quality might not be the same. Then again, they might also not want to do the exact same style for these different shows. You know, like maybe that's the risk that they can take. What kind of stories would you want to see told in a longer format, like movie or TV shows or any of that stuff from League of Legends?
I don't know if I would want a full length movie. Like, I think this kind of like basically what Arcane is now. I think that is probably a very good thing to get semi regularly. I do like really hope that they just keep putting out shorts and stuff, but I don't know if a League of Legends movie is something I would go out to see. Like, I think maybe it's definitely a hey, once it's streaming, I'll watch it, but I don't know if I'm at moviegoer level for that. You know what I mean?
Interesting. I feel like before Arcane, I would have been on the same page with you. After Arcane, I think I'm more ready to go watch that in a theater.
I mean, I don't doubt that it's gonna look good. Like, it'll probably look crazy good, especially if you're gonna go watch it in IMAX. You know, really lean into it. Watch it in D-Box or
yeah.
4DX. But I don't know if I'm at that level.
I mean, I think it's just kind of giving credit where it's due for Arcane. When I say that, I think more than anything else. Now, that's not to say the movie would be made by the same people. That's just to say that when content has been made out of League of Legends, like characters and stories, they've turned out pretty good. So that's kind of where it's at. So I think another interesting thing Riot has been doing over the last couple of years is releasing spin-off games, right? Like, the Ruined King is it Ruined King or Cursed King? I think Ruined King.
I think it's Ruined King. I don't know.
Yeah, and like Ruined King was the story that they were telling through the cutscenes for like 2-3 years, and there's another one that's coming out, Mage Seeker. Actually, it already will be out at the time of this episode's release. That seems fascinating as far as just like world building and lore and stuff is concerned as well, you know? So like there is so like it feels endless as far as like what they could focus on, what characters they could even focus on.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I would love to see more Dr. Mundo. I know that's not going to happen. Even if they don't focus on Master Yi, I think like Yasuo is a similar character as far as like, you know, coming from that part of the map. Ari, I think, is closely tied to Yasuo as well, so like that would be a cool story. I really think like, I mean, the pirate one is like, it's built, you know, they have a perfect setting to make a really, really cool series out of that stuff as well, you know, like they have great characters. Twisted Fate's great, Graves is great, Misfortune's fantastic, Gangplank is pretty interesting too, and then you can introduce the supernatural elements kind of like Pirates of the Caribbean style, right? Like it exists, but the swashbuckling also exists at the same time, and like there's so much potential there, you know. And I don't know.
I just really hope when they make it to Fake Asia and if they do a series about that, I really, really hope they just really lean into it and do it with a Japanese dub and
So there's like a bunch of videos that they did for Fake Asia are like super anime inspired. I know. It's not Fake
for
Asia,
sure. Like
but
that's definitely where. Yeah, I know that's definitely where like your inspiration is, or their inspiration is coming from. But like I don't know. I really hope they just hard lean into it.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, I'm excited to see what comes up. I feel like we've spoken about Arcane on previous episodes as well, but. Just a good chance to talk about another good, like, just the series was fucking cool. There's, you know, I mean, credit where it's due. Like, they've done a great job there. And I really feel like a lot of that also played a part in getting me to just, like, whenever I'm just sitting there with nothing specific to watch and, like, I load up Twitch, that stuff is all playing a big part in getting me back into watching League of Legends and, like, you know, hoping to, you know, getting nostalgic for those old days kind of thing as well. So, yeah. Matt, I know we've been going a long time, but I know there was one question related to these things that you wanted to tackle. So maybe we could tackle it, you know, a little bit rapid fire-ish as well. But we talked about how going back to League of Legends just feels impossible because of the big changes made to the game, the not being familiar with the game's meta and stuff like that. It is a live service. It's an ongoing game. It's something that keeps getting changed. Are there any of those kind of games that you wish you could go back to that you just know it's not possible anymore?
I mean, a lot of the live service games that I've abandoned are now also in and of themselves dead games.
Right.
But like, you know, sometimes I always look at WoW and I'm like, it'd be nice to go back into there. But that environment is way too different from when I was playing in Lich King. I actually sometimes look at my Guild Wars 2 account and think maybe I should
Man,
jump back in. I don't even know if Guild Wars 2 servers are still up,
dude, if you
but
ever log back into Guild Wars 2, let me know because that was gonna be
uh,
my answer.
yeah, like I liked Guild Wars 2 enough that I would consider going back in, but I think I remember way back in Saturday Morning Arcade, I remember you saying you logged into Guild Wars 2 after after some event that destroyed the main
Lion's
hub.
Arch.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
Lion's
will never
Arch.
forget. I fucking missed that map.
And and that I believe you said that is what killed Guild Wars 2 for you.
Big time. Yeah, no, like that was the moment where I was like, I'm done with this game.
Your home's gone.
My home's gone. And that game had, for me, become a place of comfort in a way that was just like every evening or every couple of evenings, I would log on, play that game with friend of the show, Freddie, and a couple of other people as well. And I would love it. It was a great, comforting experience. It was something that I could just lose myself in.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt like, for the sake of storytelling, they destroyed Lion's Arch. And I like, it's ironic talking about hating storytelling beats because of, the whole conversation we had around League of Legends. But it genuinely felt like a place of comfort had been snatched away from me.
Mm-hmm.
In a way that really hurt me, and I was like, "Damn, dog, I can't do this no more. I'm done." I haven't gone back to that game since. But if you log in and Lion's Arch looks like it's back, let me know because that might pull me back in.
Okay, I'll let you know when I if I ever decide to log into Guild Wars 2. I'll let you know
In 2033,
mm-hmm.
10 years from now, when we're nostalgic for that.
This isn't actually a live service game, or maybe it is. I don't actually know, but one of the games that I always want to go back into, but I feel like it's too far now, both in terms of when I played and how much DLC has come out, is Payday.
Interesting.
That is actually one that I feel is a problem that I feel is very concerning, that I never really noticed because I never had a game like this before. I don't know if you ever played it, Rakush. Did you?
I didn't play it, but I'm familiar enough with it.
Okay. So Payday 2 itself revolves a lot around, or their release cycle was revolving a lot around, hey, we're going to drop a gun pack, we're going to drop a kind of map pack, and then they kind of just go through that same kind of cycle every quarter or so. So as a result, there's just so much DLC. And this never really was a problem, I guess, back when Payday 2 initially came out, but these days I see a lot of games like this where you want to get in, and I don't know if anything comes to mind for you, but you want to get into this game, but there is such a ridiculously high amount of paid DLC that you might need to get that it discourages you from wanting to go back into the game.
There's no particular game that I want to do that where I feel like that. Actually, no, that's a lie. I think you might remember from episodes like 4 or 5 years back, One Piece Treasure Cruise, the mobile One Piece game.
Oh, yeah.
That actually got updated fairly significantly over the years, and a lot of different game modes got introduced, which required stronger cards and all that kind of stuff. And I just found like it was very difficult to get back into that game. Even just kind of like the pulling rare cards, there's like different kinds of cards now where it's like usually in gacha games like you'll get one character, but then this series introduced like scenario gacha cards and like pseudo rares like that, which I just couldn't really figure out what they were. I think trading cards in general are like a big example of what you're describing, where like the price the price of the entry point just gets higher and higher. Like Yu-Gi-Oh! I think was another example where like I think I played like the OG Yu-Gi-Oh! And then I remember a couple of years after that, like just checking in on how shit was going, and like it wasn't just like fusion cards. Now there was like tutor cards and all that kind of stuff.
It's a different game now. It's a different game.
Yeah. It's just like that kind of stuff. So I would say like those are some examples for me. But beyond that, it also sounds like Fortnite kind of has that issue where there's like I know Jaren's talked about it on past episodes with us where he talks about just like, missing out on skins or like, regretting missing out on skins or having anxiety over missing out on skins.
The way Jaren talks about it, I actually think Fortnite is the opposite.
Really?
Because there isn't anything that's stuff is time gated, yeah, but there's no functionality.
Oh, okay.
That you lose because that's more so what I meant. Like when you're going into Payday 2 now, there's so much guns you're gonna be missing. There's so much levels you're gonna be missing. There's gonna be characters that you're missing, and since they all aren't just cosmetic, you are losing functionality.
That makes sense. Okay, yeah. I mean, the examples I showed earlier still kind of stand.
Yeah,
like, I think those are
still apply. Yeah,
but I understand what you're saying.
That's just any gacha game.
Yeah, like any gacha game, any card-based game. I think like even Pokemon has been guilty of that as well, right? Where like over the years, it's all these different kinds of cards. But I don't know if there's any other examples outside of gacha games that come to mind for me.
That's true.
So this was a meaty conversation about movies. I did not expect it to go almost 90 minutes today, but I think it's a fun chat, and I think it was a bit loose, not as planned as we normally make it, Matt. But I mean, thanks for indulging me in this conversation. This was go ahead.
Oh no, I'm straight up just looking at Tetris on the Nintendo Store right now, and I'm debating buying Puyo Puyo Tetris.
Puyo Puyo Tetris is on the Classic, isn't it? The Switch Classic or whatever.
Is it? I mean, I'm looking at like Puyo Puyo Tetris 2 and Puyo Puyo Tetris.
Oh.
And I'm debating on which one I'd want to go for.
I'm almost certain one of those is on the Switch Classic Arcades. I can't remember which one, but I'm almost certain it's there. We'll check at the end of this episode.
Okay. But man, I don't know, Rakush. Puyo Puyo Tetris 2 right now is on sale until April 17th.
Matt, you know what I regret the most about this episode? We are called The Mistake Zone, brought to you by Saturday Morning Arcade, and we didn't even tie the word arcade into Tetris once this episode.
That's cool. You know what? Tetris isn't an arcade game, Rakush. Tetris is all about the handheld.
Tetris was an arcade game, too.
Tetris is all about the handheld, Rakush.
You're right. Tetris really is. I think we're at the end of this episode. There's not much else for us to talk about.
It's just a 75% savings. You know, Puyo Puyo Tetris 2 was $53. I do not think that this game is worth $53.
So 75% off on that. What is it now?
$13.37. Yeah.
That's
not
sorry,
bad.
$13.37. Like elite.
Yeah, it's elite. Yeah.
You gotta buy it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you made the case for it.
Damn. Okay.
Hey, before we leave, actually, you want to give a bit of information on what you're doing with the YouTube channel?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to try to upload more stuff onto the YouTube channel. For sure, I'm going to put out a what to watch as far as animes go before each season. I want to put out more content on there, but I'm not really sure what kind of content I can make that I can also repeatedly do for other stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's just something cool to check out. I know you posted a video on there already.
We showed it a bunch last week. Or I guess 2 weeks ago, yeah.
Well, I haven't listened to the whole episode from last week. You know, my attention span is not what it used to be. But no, like, you know, they're just keep an eye out on the YouTube channel. There's some cool stuff there. You know, Matt's it's kind of inspiring me to maybe try out some stuff as well. I've got a lot more free time lately. Been making that joke a lot with friends in our Discord, but you know, just keep an eye out there. He's putting out some cool stuff. I know you guys showed it. My chance to show it for you now. So
nice. Yo, Rakush. Thanks.
Yeah, bro.
Thanks.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we're all part of this together.
Yeah. Yo, not only thanks for shilling, but you know, thanks for covering for our isekai friend Jaren.
Anytime, you know. The joke next week, spoiler alert, is Jaren actually came back to the episode, but he actually got isekai'd back to this world in my body. So it's Jarakush.
It's the worst. Oh man, got a raw deal on that one. I think.
I got isekai'd and then got isekai'd again into a brown dude's body with like a question mark and apostrophe, exclamation mark.
That's a very anime side. I'm pretty sure there's a manga that is actually similar to that. Not specifically a brown guy's body, but like I got isekai'd and then isekai'd again into a different thing. But you know,
listen, you've sent me some insane title names recently, so I would not be shocked if that shit
manga
exists.
titles are so good, Rakush. They're so good. I really wish.
Yeah, let's not let. We're hitting 90 minutes. I don't think we can go further than that on this, but Next episode, we are gonna be doing something interesting as well. Something that I'm not really familiar with, so I'm really looking forward to that chat next week too. Yeah, a little bit of a teaser there as well. All right, Matt, take it away, bro.
This has been the Mistake Zone, and we're all out of the USSR, I think.
For now.